Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
You ever get slapped so hard by your own family that it doesn't even sting anymore? It just leaves you numb, sitting there like a damn fool while everyone pretends nothing happened. That was me every year without fail when birthday season rolled around. My brother Eric's birthday was a full-blown, all-out, bring the neighbors, rent the hall, put it on the credit card kind of event. Thousands spent without a blink, every time. They handed him keys to a brand new car when he turned 18, a thick envelope stuffed with cash at 21, and a week-long trip to Cabo with his friends when he hit 25. I stood there every year, clapping and smiling like a trained circus dog, pretending it didn't gut me from the inside out. And me? Oh, they didn't forget me exactly, but it felt worse than if they had. I got $20. Not even crisp bills either. It was a $20 gift card to some chain restaurant I never even went to. The card wasn't even in an envelope, just taped to a blank Hallmark card that still smelled like the checkout line. No message inside, just happy birthday, love mom and dad scrawled like an afterthought. I could almost see them standing in the kitchen that morning, realizing they forgot, scrambling for something, anything, that they could hand me with a half-assed smile. It wasn't even about the money. It wasn't the $20 versus the thousands. Hell, it wasn't even about the stupid car or the vacation or the brand new guitar Eric never learned to play. It was the message behind it all, loud and clear. Eric matters. You're just kind of here. Every damn year, they said it without saying it. You're the one who's gonna make it big one day, Eric, Dad would boom, clapping him on the back so hard it sounded like a gunshot. We believe in you, son. Mom would chime in, beaming like Shed just won the lottery. And me? Best I got was a distracted smile and a pat on the shoulder, like I was a dog that had learned a new trick. Maybe next year, they'd whisper. Maybe next year he'll do something worth celebrating. It's funny, you know? You spend enough years being invisible, and you start to believe you're a ghost. You move quieter. You want less. You expect nothing. And somewhere deep down, you start carving a little room inside yourself, a cold, dark little room labeled "Prove Them Wrong." I started furnishing that room real young, and by the time I hit my 20s, it was about the only place I could call home. This past year, I knew I couldn't do it again. I couldn't walk into that house, see the balloons, the banners, the big stupid grin on Eric's face, and pretend like it didn't rip me apart. I couldn't sit at the corner of the dining room table with my cold slice of pizza while they toasted to his bright future and bragged about his half-assed job selling insurance like he was the next Rockefeller. I couldn't listen to Dad go on about how Eric was destined for greatness while I silently swallowed everything I had worked for like it was some dirty secret. Because here's the part they never asked about. While they were throwing every spare dollar and ounce of attention at Eric, I was out there hustling. Grinding. Building. I was working 2 jobs during college, teaching myself coding at night, flipping used electronics on eBay, eating ramen, and sleeping on an air mattress in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 roommates who smelled like weed and bad decisions. I was drowning some days, sure. But I was learning how to swim, too, in waters they never even saw. It took years. It took late nights and early mornings and saying no to every easy way out. It took eating shit sandwiches with a smile and hearing no 1,000 times before one yes cracked open the sky. But somewhere along the way, quietly, invisibly, I started winning. Small at first. Then bigger. And bigger. Until one day, I looked up and realized, damn. I had built something they couldn't even comprehend. And that's when the idea hit me. Like a switch flipping. Like a fuse finally reaching the dynamite. I wasn't going to show up to Eric's birthday party this year. No, sir. I wasn't going to walk into that house again like the family charity case. I had something different planned. Something they would never, ever forget. I sat back in my chair, staring at my laptop screen, fingers tapping against the wood, heart thudding slow and steady in my chest. I could see it so clearly. The moment their faces would drop, The fake smiles would freeze, and the truth would punch them right between the eyes. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about revenge. Not really. It was about finally being seen. About standing up and saying, loud and clear, "You were wrong about me." This year, I wasn't bringing a $20 gift card. I was bringing a goddamn earthquake. This year, I had something different planned. From the moment Eric took his first steps, the world seemed to stretch itself out before him like a red carpet, every adult in our lives cheering him on like he had already cured cancer by managing to wobble 3 feet across the living room. I swear, if the kid tied his shoes without falling over, they threw a goddamn parade. Eric was the golden boy, the crown prince, the anointed one in a family where expectations weren't just hopes, they were heavy, living things, passed down like sacred heirlooms. Mom would lean over the dinner table, smiling that big bright smile she only reserved for him, and say things like, "Eric, you're going to be somebody, I just know it." Dad would nod, serious as a heart attack, and talk about legacy, about building something that would last, about how Eric was cut from a different cloth, while I sat across the table, poking at my overcooked meatloaf, pretending not to hear every damn word like a stone in my shoe I could never shake loose. It started small, of course. Little league games where Eric struck out 3 times, but still got the game ball for team spirit. Science fairs where his baking soda volcano, which, by the way, I helped him build, won first prize because he has such leadership skills, even though he spent most of the time throwing paper airplanes at the judges. Christmases when he tore open box after box of the latest tech gadgets, mountain bikes, and leather jackets, while my gifts, cheaper, smaller, sometimes suspiciously regifted, sat quietly in the corner, gathering dust before the paper even hit the floor. But the birthdays, oh, the birthdays were a whole different beast. Every year, bigger than the last, a new high watermark in the ever-growing monument to Eric's inevitable success. One year it was a brand new electric guitar, even though he couldn't play a note. Another year, it was a fully loaded Jeep Wrangler with a giant red bow stuck on the hood, delivered right to the driveway like we were some kind of goddamn sitcom family. They hired photographers. They made a whole production of it, like it was the second coming of Christ. Meanwhile, my birthdays felt like an afterthought, a box they checked out of guilt more than anything else. I remember one year, maybe I was about 14, when they forgot altogether until Mom saw me sitting on the front steps after dinner, just waiting. She gasped, made a big show of apologizing, and rummaged around in her purse until she found a $5 bill, which she pressed into my hand like she was giving me the keys to the kingdom. That $5 burned a hole in my palm all night long, and I swore to myself, quietly, that one day they'd choke on their own damn indifference. Eric never saw it, never noticed, or maybe he just didn't care. He drifted through life on a cloud of endless second chances, where every screw-up was just a learning opportunity and every lazy, half-assed effort was showing potential. When he crashed Dad's old truck after sneaking out one night drunk, they framed it as boys will be boys and bought him a newer, better one 6 months later. When he barely scraped through college with a degree in business, the most generic, fallback major you can imagine, they threw a backyard party like he had just graduated summa cum laude from Harvard. They never looked at me that way. They never said, "David, you're going to be somebody." They never bought me a car or hosted a party or clapped me on the back with that proud sparkle in their eyes. I was the extra, the background noise, the kid who was good because he didn't cause problems, and if they noticed me at all, it was to say, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" Ever felt like the outsider in your own damn family? Tell me I'm not the only one. Sometimes it messes with your head, you know? Makes you wonder if maybe you really are just less than. Maybe there's something broken in you that they see and you don't. Maybe they're right not to bet on you, not to waste their love, not to spend their hard-earned money on someone who's just going to fade into nothing. But somewhere deep down, past all the self-doubt and anger and sadness, I felt it growing. A stubborn, ragged thing. Hunger. Not for their approval anymore. That ship had sailed so long ago it was dust on the horizon. No, it was bigger than that. It was a hunger to prove, first to them, then to the world, and finally to myself, that I was more than just the backup plan. More than just the extra chair at the table. The more they shoved me aside, the hungrier I got. High school was supposed to be the place where things evened out, where the slate got wiped a little cleaner, where maybe a kid like me could start carving out something that was mine, something nobody could take away or overlook. That's what all the after-school specials said anyway, but in my house, some things were carved in concrete long before I ever stepped into that grimy hallway lined with lockers that never quite closed right. I walked those halls with my head down, my backpack slung low, my sneakers dragging a little because somewhere along the way, even my body got tired of trying to take up space where it wasn't wanted. Eric had been a legend in that school, of course, not because he was some kind of academic or athletic prodigy, but because he knew how to work the system just enough to stay beloved. He was the kind of guy who could copy your homework 5 minutes before class and still get a high five from the teacher. When he got caught smoking behind the gym, it was brushed off with a laugh and a boys will be boys, just like always. When he got suspended for sneaking into the girls' locker room on a dare, the principal, an old buddy of Dad's from their Little League coaching days, made sure it was wiped from his record by the end of the month. Meanwhile, I was quietly stacking up my little wins, my invisible trophies that nobody but me cared about. I made honor roll every semester, but the certificates stayed tucked away in a drawer under my bed because the only time Mom and Dad ever came to an award ceremony was the year Eric got a Most Improved ribbon for track and field, even though he quit the team 2 weeks later. I won a regional math competition once, brought home a cheap plastic trophy with my name spelled wrong on the plaque, and all Dad said when I showed it to him was, "Math, huh? Well, that's good, I guess." Not everyone's cut out for sales. I spent a lot of time at the library after school, not because I was some kind of nerd desperate for extra credit, but because it was quiet there, and more importantly, nobody expected anything from me. I could sit at a table in the back with my beat-up laptop, teaching myself things I knew nobody else in my house would ever care about: coding, marketing, how to build a website from scratch, how to sell junk online and turn $20 into 200. Every book I read, every article I printed out and highlighted and tucked into a growing file under my bed, felt like another brick in the escape hatch I was quietly building while nobody was looking. Eric coasted through his senior year with a beer in one hand and a girl in the other, racking up C-minuses and broken curfews like they were merit badges. When he barely scraped by enough to graduate, they threw him a graduation party that cost more than my first car would one day. They rented a tent, hired a caterer, strung up lights all over the backyard like it was a goddamn wedding. Dad made a big speech about how proud he was, about how Eric was going to make the family name proud, about how he was headed for big things, even though the only thing Eric had lined up was a job washing cars at his buddy's dad's dealership. I stood there on the edges of that party, sipping flat soda from a red plastic cup, wondering if anyone even knew it was my last summer at home. I had already applied to colleges far enough away that nobody could just drop by for a surprise visit, and gotten into one nobody had even bothered to ask me about. I picked a school not because it was prestigious or because it had a great football team, but because it was cheap enough with scholarships that I could swing it without asking them for a single damn thing. I didn't tell them right away. Part of me wanted to see if they would notice. Spoiler alert, they didn't. While Eric spent his summer finding himself, which mostly meant sleeping until noon and mooching beer money off Mom, I was working 2 part-time jobs, saving every penny I could get my hands on, planning my escape down to the last miserable detail. I knew I couldn't just leave. I had to vanish in a way that made it impossible for them to drag me back. I needed a clean break, a hard reset, a life that was mine and mine alone. It wasn't about revenge back then. Not really. It was about survival. About breathing for the first time without someone else's expectations pressing down on my chest. Some nights, lying awake in that cramped little room I had shared with Eric before he moved into the bigger one Dad cleared out for him, I would stare at the ceiling and picture my life like a map, tiny roads branching out from a dead-end town nobody ever escaped from. I wasn't sure yet where I was going or how exactly I was going to get there, but I knew one thing down to my bones. If I stayed, I was going to drown, quietly and without ceremony, and nobody would even notice I was gone. They didn't see it happening, didn't see the savings account growing by $20 here, $50 there, didn't see the late nights spent packing up the few things I wanted to take with me, didn't see the applications and acceptances and plans all stacking up like a tower just waiting to topple over. They were too busy clapping for Eric, too busy cheering for the empty promises he tossed around like candy, too busy living in a fantasy where he was the second coming and I was just there. Background noise. They didn't even know I was already halfway gone. The day I finally left home, it was like slipping out of a party nobody remembered inviting me to in the first place. No dramatic goodbyes, no teary hugs. Just a distracted wave from Mom and a grunt from Dad as I lugged 2 battered suitcases out to the rusted old sedan I had bought with my own damn money. Eric was still in bed, probably nursing a hangover, and I remember thinking how fitting it was that even my final exit was just another thing they wouldn't bother to notice. I didn't even look back at the house, that worn-out ranch on a cracked suburban street where the grass always grew too long and nobody ever fixed the screen door. The college I chose wasn't the kind you saw in movies, no ivy-covered walls or soaring clock towers, just a cluster of squat brick buildings crammed between an abandoned strip mall and a Waffle House, but it was mine. It was far enough away that nobody could show up uninvited, and cheap enough that I could cover most of the tuition with scholarships and whatever money I scraped together over the last 2 years. I moved into a shoebox of a dorm room with peeling paint and a radiator that rattled like a dying engine, but for the first time in my life, I breathed air that didn't taste like failure. Classes were fine, easy even, but I knew from the start that a degree alone wasn't going to save me. Nobody in my family had ever made it big by being patient, and nobody was coming to rescue me if I stumbled. I worked every shift I could grab, waiting tables in a greasy diner at night, tutoring spoiled rich kids in math on weekends, even selling my own notes to desperate classmates when finals rolled around. Every dollar went into savings, and every hour not spent on work or school went into building something better, something real, something that couldn't be taken away or ignored. I taught myself web design from scratch, pulling free tutorials off shady websites and spending long nights staring at my cracked laptop screen until my eyes burned. I learned how to build online stores, how to flip products, how to write ads that made people click without even thinking about it. I made mistakes, plenty of them, lost money I couldn't afford to lose, pulled 2 all-nighters in a row just to make $100 selling knockoff phone cases that barely covered my rent. Some nights, lying awake in that narrow bed with springs that dug into my back, I would wonder if I had made a massive mistake, if maybe Mom and Dad had been right all along. If maybe Eric really was destined for something bigger and I was just fooling myself with these half-baked dreams. Those were the nights when the dark voice in my head, the one that sounded suspiciously like my father's disappointed sigh, would whisper that I was wasting my time, that I would end up crawling back home with nothing but a degree nobody cared about and a lifetime of resentment I could wear like a second skin. There were nights when the hunger turned sour, when it wasn't fire fueling me anymore, but pure exhaustion. Nights when I stared at my checking account and realized I had just enough for a can of soup and a tank of gas, but not both. Nights when I seriously considered packing it all in, calling Dad and begging for a loan, selling out the only thing I had built with my own 2 hands. Pride and rage were sometimes the only things that kept me moving forward, bitter twins that dug their claws into my back and shoved me toward a future I still couldn't quite see but couldn't let go of either. It wasn't glamorous, not by a long shot. While Eric posted pictures from pool parties and tailgates, grinning like a guy who thought the world was his just because nobody had ever told him otherwise, I was eating stale ramen noodles out of chip bowls and washing my socks in the dorm sink because I couldn't afford the laundromat. While he racked up debt on a shiny new credit card Dad co-signed for him without a second thought, I was counting out coins for bus fare and wondering if ambition was just another word for slow-motion drowning. But somewhere inside all that struggle, a sharper version of myself was forming, a version that didn't need applause or approval, a version that could take a punch and get back up without even flinching. I started seeing patterns, which businesses made money and which ones were just spinning their wheels, how marketing really worked, what customers actually wanted instead of what we thought they wanted. I started thinking bigger, riskier, learning to trust my gut even when my bank account was screaming at me to play it safe. Still, I knew I couldn't do it alone forever. There were too many pieces missing, too many blind spots I couldn't fill with stubbornness and late nights. I needed someone who had been through the fire already, someone who could show me the things the textbooks never talked about, the tricks and traps of building something that mattered. I didn't know where to find that person, didn't know if they even existed in my dusty little college town where ambition usually meant dreaming about managing a Chili's someday. Then one afternoon, just as I was about to give up and settle for another semester of scraping by, I walked into a job interview that wasn't even supposed to happen and met a man who saw right through the scared, angry kid I was trying so hard to hide. He looked at me with those cold, sharp eyes and smiled like he already knew exactly how my story was going to end, and somehow, even though every warning bell in my head started clanging at once, I stayed in that room. Until I met the man who changed everything. The first time I met Jack Winters, he didn't look like much, just another old man in a faded blue suit, hunched over a chip desk in a half-dead office building that smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. If you walked past him on the street, you wouldn't give him a second glance, but the minute he opened his mouth, you understood you were standing in front of a man who could dismantle your entire life with a smile and a handshake. Jack wasn't charming in the way people like Eric were. He wasn't flashy or smooth, didn't tell you what you wanted to hear or soften the edges of his words to make you comfortable. No, Jack was the kind of man who carved you up with the truth and made you thank him for it afterward. I stumbled into his office looking for a low-rent marketing job, something to slap on my resume while I kept building my side hustles at night. Jack listened to me stumble through my pitch, all nervous smiles and corporate buzzwords, then leaned back in his chair, laced his fingers behind his head, and laughed a laugh that sounded like gravel in a blender. When he finally spoke, it wasn't with any kind of kindness or encouragement. He told me straight out that I was soft, that the world would eat me alive, that nobody gave a damn about potential unless it came stapled to results. Most people would have walked out of that room humiliated, maybe even angry, but something about the way Jack looked at me, like he was daring me to prove him wrong, lit a fire under my skin that burned hotter than anything my parents or Eric had ever sparked. I didn't walk out. I stayed. I asked him what he would do if he were me, what he would build if he had nothing but hunger and rage and a little bit of raw skill. Jack grinned then, a slow, nasty thing, and told me to come back the next morning at 6 sharp if I really wanted to find out what I was made of. What followed wasn't mentorship in the way people like to talk about it nowadays, with Instagram quotes and soft-focus success stories. Jack didn't teach me business with PowerPoints and motivational speeches. He taught me by throwing me into the deep end without a life vest and telling me to figure it out or drown. He made me cold call 200 businesses in a single day, made me pitch products that barely existed yet, made me get comfortable hearing no so many times that the word lost all its teeth. He taught me that business wasn't about being the smartest guy in the room. It was about being the guy who kept showing up long after the others went home to cry into their pillows. He taught me that loyalty was a currency you should spend carefully, that the people who cheered the loudest for your success were usually the first ones sharpening their knives when you stumbled. He taught me that if you ever found yourself wanting sympathy, you were already 2 steps away from failure. I hated him sometimes, hated the way he smirked when I screwed up, hated the way he never let me celebrate a win for more than 5 minutes before pointing out the next mountain I needed to climb. But buried under all that hate was a kind of brutal gratitude because for the first time in my life, someone was shaping me into something real, not a watered-down version of what a family wanted, not a ghost dragging around old wounds, but a weapon sharp enough to cut through the world on my own terms. With Jack's help, or maybe under Jack's relentless hammering, I launched my first real company before I even graduated. It wasn't flashy, just a scrappy little digital marketing outfit that specialized in helping small businesses find their footing online. I started with 3 clients, 2 of whom could barely pay their invoices on time, but I treated every single one like they were Fortune 500 royalty. I worked every angle, learned every platform, ran ads, built websites, tracked analytics until my eyes felt like they would bleed. I answered emails at 3 in the morning and still showed up for 8 a.m. classes like nothing was wrong. Slowly, painfully, the company grew. Word of mouth, late-night cold calls, random chance meetings at sad networking events. It all started stacking up until suddenly it wasn't just 3 clients anymore. It was 20, then 50, then 100. I stopped waiting tables. I stopped counting pennies at the grocery store. I stopped wondering if I would have to crawl back home in shame. Jack didn't celebrate any of it. He didn't throw a party or give me a pat on the back. The day I cleared my first 6-figure year, he handed me a bottle of cheap whiskey, sat me down in the battered leather chair across from his desk, and said, "Now it gets harder, kid. You ready for that?" And I was. God help me, I was. There were moments, sure, moments when I wondered if Jack was just another version of my old man, another voice telling me I wasn't good enough no matter how high I climbed. But there was a difference too, a crucial one. Jack didn't want me to stay small. Jack didn't need me to fail so he could feel bigger. He didn't care if I liked him, didn't care if I hated him, didn't even care if one day I outgrew him and left him behind. All Jack wanted was to see if I could become something that couldn't be ignored. By the time I was 26, I had something better than their approval. It came the same way it always did, tucked between bills and junk mail, a cheap, glossy invitation printed off some discount website, complete with balloons and streamers and Eric's stupid smiling face pasted right there in the middle like he had just won the goddamn Nobel Prize for existing. I held the envelope in my hand for a long moment, standing there in my apartment doorway, feeling the old familiar twist in my gut that I had thought maybe, just maybe, I had finally outgrown. It had been a few years since I had gone back, years packed full of long nights and brutal lessons, small wins that stacked up into something real, and, even still, that one piece of paper had the power to hit a nerve that hadn't gone completely dead yet. They wanted me back for another one of Eric's big shows, another family gathering where they would sing his praises loud enough to drown out the sound of everything he hadn't done, every promise he hadn't kept, every handout he had taken with a smile and wasted without a second thought. I pictured the scene before I even read the details, Mom fluttering around in the kitchen with a tray of hors d'oeuvres nobody would touch, Dad standing in the backyard gripping a beer and talking about how Eric was getting closer every day to that big breakthrough nobody could ever quite define, relatives I barely knew clapping him on the back and asking him questions like he was some kind of prodigy. The part they never learned, the part that always burned hotter than anything else, was that I would have shown up. Hell, I would have come running if they had ever once looked me in the eyes and said, "We're proud of you too." It wasn't about the gifts or the money or the party tents or any of that crap. It was about the fact that no matter how high I climbed, no matter what I built, in their eyes, I would always be the runner-up, the backup plan, the afterthought. This year, I smiled when I opened the invitation because I already knew what they expected. They thought I would show up in my bargain rack button-down shirt, the same beat-up car, the same polite smile glued to my face, pretending that the yawning distance between us didn't feel like it could swallow me whole. They thought I would shake Eric's hand over some pitiful little gift, and sit quietly while everyone raised their glasses to a future that only existed in their heads. They thought they knew who I was. They had no clue. I had been laying low for a reason, keeping my wins quiet, staying out of the spotlight even as my company exploded into something bigger than I ever dared imagine back when I was scraping quarters together for gas money. It wasn't just about making money anymore, it was about building something bulletproof, something so undeniable that even the people who refused to see me would have no choice but to choke on their own damn silence. By the time that invitation landed in my mailbox, I had offices in 3 cities, contracts locked in with companies that made my parents' combined salaries look like spare change, and a yacht, yes, a real, honest-to-God yacht, being cleaned and polished for a private party I was throwing 2 states away from whatever sad little barbecue they were planning in Eric's honor. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't even angry anymore. I wasn't bitter or sad or desperate for their validation. I was something colder, something sharper. I was ready. I could have ignored the invite, could have torn it up and gone on living my life, perfectly content never to look back at the people who taught me how small love could feel when it was rationed out like a punishment. But deep down, I wanted them to know. I wanted them to see what they had thrown away, what they had underestimated, what they had chosen not to believe in because it didn't fit the story they liked better, the one where Eric was the hero and I was the cautionary tale. So I RSVP'd with a smile, clicked attending on the cheap online form they had set up, and then set about planning something a little more memorable. It wasn't about rubbing their noses in it. It wasn't about revenge. It was about standing up and saying, finally and without apology, I am not who you think I am. I called my assistant, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Mia who didn't even blink when I told her I needed a professional videographer and a sleek edit job done in less than a week. I told her exactly what I wanted, the shots, the tone, the music, the timing, and she made it happen with the kind of ruthless efficiency that Jack Winters himself would have respected. The day of Eric's party, while they were stringing up streamers and icing down cheap beer, I was standing on the deck of my yacht, the skyline gleaming behind me, dressed in a suit that cost more than my first car, smiling into the camera like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. I laid it all out clean and simple, no bragging, no shouting, just facts. My company name, my title, the partnerships we had secured, the people I was employing, the future I was carving out with my own damn hands. At the end of the video, I raised my glass, a real one, heavy crystal, not some solo cup, and offered a toast. To Eric, I said, voice smooth, steady, maybe even a little kind, for showing me exactly who not to be. Mia had the video ready to send within minutes, queued up and scheduled to land right in Mom's inbox about halfway through the party, timed perfectly for when the cake came out and everyone was gathered close, laughing and drunk on cheap nostalgia. As I watched the final version play back on my phone, the sun setting fire to the water around me, I realized there was no going back after this. No more pretending. No more waiting. No more invisible kid. They thought they knew who I was. They had no clue. The morning of the party broke wide open and brilliant, the kind of sharp, golden day you see in postcards, but almost never in real life, the kind that practically begged you to believe that something was about to change. I stood barefoot on the deck of my yacht, the sea stretched out around me like a giant silver sheet just waiting for someone to tear it in half, and for the first time in a long, long time, I let myself breathe all the way in, no tightness in my chest, no second-guessing weighing me down. The crew, a small team that handled the boat with the kind of easy professionalism you can't fake, was bustling around behind me, setting up the last touches for the shoot. Nothing too flashy, nothing cartoonish, just clean lines, polished wood, the glint of sunlight catching on the smooth white hull. I didn't want fireworks or dancing girls or some ridiculous flex that looked like it belonged in a bad rap video. No, I wanted clarity. I wanted elegance. I wanted them to see me standing there, calm, composed, untouchable, and realize they had been playing checkers while I was out here building a damn empire. Mia handed me the champagne glass, real crystal, heavy and cold in my hand, and gave me a sharp nod that told me everything was ready. The camera was set, the angles were checked, the script, such as it was, lived only in my head, and I didn't need to rehearse it because it wasn't a performance. It was the truth. It was my truth, the one they never bothered to ask about, the one they never thought to imagine for me. I adjusted the cuffs of my suit jacket, deep blue with a subtle pattern you'd only notice if you got close enough, and when Mia counted down from 3 with her fingers, I stepped into frame like I had been born for this moment. Like every slight and dismissal and $20 birthday card had been fuel for this one beautiful act of rebellion. "Hey, everyone," I started, voice easy, casual, no hint of bitterness to taint the edges. "Sorry I couldn't be there in person today. I'm a little tied up." I smiled then, just a little, just enough to let the sharp ones in the room start to feel the knot forming in their guts. Behind me, the yacht stretched wide and gleaming, and the city skyline burned bright in the background like a crown I had forged myself. "I just wanted to send a quick hello," I continued, lifting the champagne glass slightly, "and share a little life update since it's been a while." I paused, letting the silence fill the space, letting the weight of what was coming hang there just long enough for discomfort to start blooming in the backs of their throats. As of this year, I'm the founder and CEO of Horizon Strategies, a marketing and tech consulting firm working with some of the biggest names in the country. I said it clean, said it sharp, no bragging, no swagger, just the kind of quiet confidence you can't fake. We've expanded into 3 cities so far, with plans to open 2 more by next fall. Another pause, just enough time for them to start shifting in their seats, to start realizing they had missed something, that maybe they didn't know me at all. I tilted the glass toward the camera again, smiling wider now, that same easy smile they had never once thought to take seriously. "I owe a lot of this journey to the lessons I learned growing up," I said, voice still smooth, still steady, still just this side of cutting. Lessons about working hard even when nobody's watching. About keeping your head down and your mouth shut until you've got something real to say. I stepped back slightly, letting the camera take in more of the boat, more of the life they never imagined I could build, the life they never thought to invest in because they were too busy waiting for Eric to stumble his way into greatness. "Anyway," I said, raising my glass one last time, "I hope you all have a great party. Happy birthday, Eric. Here's to you, and here's to proving that sometimes the best thing you can be is underestimated." I held the glass high for a beat, long enough for the toast to land like a punch to the ribs, then took a slow sip of the champagne, crisp and dry and perfect, and let Mia cut the feed clean. We didn't wait. I didn't hesitate. Mia hit send on the video while I was still wiping condensation off the side of my glass, scheduled to arrive in Mom's inbox exactly 30 seconds after the first round of happy birthday finished, when everyone would be gathered around, smiling. Drunk on cheap wine and old stories, completely unprepared for the truth to come slicing through the room like a knife. I could picture it so clearly it almost felt like déjà vu, the clink of glasses, the hum of low conversation, the way Mom would beam at Eric like he had personally invented electricity, the way Dad would tell some recycled story about Eric's business savvy while conveniently forgetting he was still living in their guest house, dodging job interviews like they were landmines. And then, the moment. Someone noticing the email. Mom probably, her phone buzzing in her apron pocket, her face lighting up because, oh look, David sent a message after all. Isn't that nice? Isn't that sweet? She'd gather everyone around. She'd make a big show of tapping the screen, and she would hit play without even thinking twice. And when they hit play, their jaws hit the floor. The first call came less than an hour after the video dropped, my phone buzzing across the polished wood of the yacht's table like it had a mind of its own, vibrating in these short, angry bursts that somehow told me everything I needed to know before I even picked it up. I didn't answer at first. I just sat there, letting it buzz, letting the anger and confusion and hurt swirl around on the other end of the line like a pot boiling over, while I stared out at the water and tried to feel something more than the cold satisfaction that had been settling deeper in my bones ever since I made the decision to send that video. Mom was the first to call, predictably enough, her name flashing across the screen in big bold letters that for a second almost made me laugh, because after all this time, it was only now, after everything, that she suddenly remembered how to reach out to me. She left a voicemail, her voice tight and brittle, layered with that strange, wounded tone only people who have spent years ignoring you can conjure when you finally refuse to be ignored. She said she didn't understand why I would do something so cruel, said the party was ruined, said Eric was embarrassed and humiliated in front of everyone, said she had always loved me even if maybe she hadn't shown it the way she should have. Then Dad called, and his message was shorter, sharper, filled with the kind of anger that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with pride being wounded in front of an audience. His voice cracked like a whip through the phone, warning me that I had burned bridges I couldn't rebuild, that I had crossed a line I didn't even deserve to walk near, that I had made a spectacle of myself and shamed the family name by airing dirty laundry that should have stayed buried where it belonged. Eric didn't leave a voicemail. He just kept calling over and over again, the relentless buzzing of my phone becoming almost a background hum against the steady rhythm of the waves lapping against the hull. I finally answered on the fifth or sixth call, partly out of curiosity, partly because a piece of me, some stubborn, angry part that hadn't gotten the memo that I was done needing anything from him, still wanted to hear what he had to say. The first thing he did was laugh, this low, bitter sound that had no humor in it at all, and then he launched into a tirade so furious and clumsy it almost sounded rehearsed, like he had been waiting years for an excuse to let it all out. He called me an asshole, said I had blindsided him, said I had embarrassed not just him but the whole damn family, said that all the money, all the support, all the attention he had gotten was because he deserved it. Because he was the one who had real potential and I was just some bitter little freak who had gotten lucky and thought that made him important. I let him talk. I didn't interrupt, didn't defend myself, didn't feed the fire by arguing back. I just listened, staring out at the endless horizon where the sky and the sea met in a perfect, blinding line, feeling something hollow and tired uncurling deep inside my chest. When he finally ran out of steam, when the insults slowed down and the breathing on the other end of the line turned ragged and small, I said the only thing that felt honest in that moment. I didn't do it for you, I said quietly, so quietly that for a second I thought maybe he hadn't even heard me. I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it because I needed them to see me. Really see me. Even if it was too late. He didn't say anything after that, just hung up with a sharp, angry click. The kind of ending that doesn't satisfy anybody but still feels inevitable. I let the phone fall onto the table and leaned back in my chair, staring up at the sky as the last traces of sunlight started to fade into the soft bruised colors of twilight. The party was over. The bridge was burned. The family I had once bent myself into knots trying to fit inside was now a smoldering wreck behind me, and there was no going back, not really. I could almost see the flames in my mind, high and wild and strangely beautiful, and for a moment I let myself wonder if I had made a terrible mistake, if maybe the hollow victory I was feeling wasn't triumph at all but something closer to grief. Because the truth is, it hadn't been about revenge when I started. It hadn't been about sticking it to Eric or humiliating Mom and Dad in front of the neighbors. It had been about a kid sitting on a front step one forgotten birthday after another, clutching a wrinkled $5 bill and wondering what it would take to be enough. It had been about building something that nobody could ignore. It had been about trying to fill a hole that maybe, just maybe, had no bottom at all. I stood up slowly, the yacht shifting gently beneath my feet, and walked to the railing, the cool night air rushing past my face like a bomb. The city lights in the distance twinkled like stars fallen to earth, and somewhere beyond them was a house full of people who would spend the rest of the night trying to make sense of a version of me they had never bothered to imagine. Maybe they would hate me for it. Maybe they would forget about me even faster now. Maybe none of it mattered in the end. Maybe I won. Maybe I lost. You tell me.